Welcome, everybody. In particular, Deputy Mayor Sperling, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Fibre to the Home conference. It's my pleasure to welcome you all here to Marseille, and in particular to our 14th annual Fibre to the Home conference. Before I go into my speech, per the guidance from Deputy Mayor Sperling, Marseille is really genuinely a beautiful city. If you do get the opportunity later on after the conference today, or on your way to Vibration Night later on, please take some time to take a look around the harbour and the area. It really is very, very beautiful and fantastic. Let me begin by focusing a little bit on our host country here, France. France is now a member of a select club of leaders in the European Fibre to the Home community. And it has risen to this prominent position because its leaders and its industry saw the advantages of Fibre to the Home earlier than most. Because there was a vision of what can be achieved with the kind of capacity that only fibre can deliver. Because there was recognition of how important it will be for France to be amongst the world's digital leaders as we approach the third decade of this century. Because France knows that her children will need this fibre foundation in order to be able to compete successfully on a global digital stage. The leadership demonstrated by France and others have helped to ensure that this vision is seeping into the European Commission. The Commission's recent Gigabit Society communication makes a strong start towards setting out a vision where we have very widespread, very high capacity networks, and they underpin the services to society that will keep Europe at the forefront of economic development globally. We've made huge progress in moving forward. However, there is more to do, which brings me to the points that I'd like to touch on today. Firstly, what is our vision as Fibre to the Home Council for Europe for the future? Why is fibre the right infrastructure to achieve that vision? And where have we made progress, and what do we need to do next? Let me begin with our vision. Many of the potential uses of fibre to the home will have significant impacts on society. Foundational to digital innovation, fibre-based societies will be equipped to deal with the inevitable future growth challenges as our world becomes increasingly digital and as our population construct continues to age. For me, fibre to the home, coupled with the deep fibre that will be needed to deliver on the gigabit society that Europe is aspiring for, is not about generic internet connectivity. Instead, it's about laying the foundation for Europe's children to be able to compete on a level playing field with their global peers. It's about removing the barriers to digital innovation so Europe can be positioned at the forefront of the world's digital societies. It's about ensuring that Europe has the necessary infrastructure to permit its industries to take a leading position in the emerging arenas of 5G, autonomous vehicles, IoT, smart grid, and more importantly, all the future digital industries that we haven't yet imagined. They need that future-proof infrastructure. For me, this is about building the bootstrap that will be needed to kickstart Europe's economy and ensure that we do not get relegated to becoming the digital impoverished of this third decade of this millennium. Fibre to the home infrastructures are about inclusion. They are about the removal of barriers. They are about ensuring that our future innovators are not restricted by the capabilities of infrastructure from the last century. It's about ensuring our innovators are free to create the next Googles or Amazons, comfortable in the knowledge that their national infrastructure can scale to meet the needs that they'll have to service a global economy. Fibre to the home infrastructures will facilitate the transition of digital workers to home working environments and will ensure that the application of telemedicine and care will have a profound impact on how our aging societies function in the future. In the case of home working, This will bring many benefits, including the ability for fibre-rich communities to retain their best and brightest, rather than suffer the continuity of traditional brain drain to the large cities throughout the world. And this has direct positive impacts, ranging from positive GDP growth in the regions, to increases in property prices, to relief in traffic congestion in our cities and towns, while in parallel allowing those that are faced with long commutes to claw back increasingly scarce personal time, while we all reduce our personal impact on the environment. In the case of home-based e-health applications, decongestion of our already overstretched healthcare facilities, along with substantial financial savings to the state, can be anticipated. However, the largest benefits will be for the users of these new telemedicine and telecare services, permitted to remain safely within their community for much longer as a productive member of society. Quality of life will be substantially improved for all. In parallel, the duration of time spent in elderly care facilities per individual can be greatly reduced, easing the burden on already existing creaking resources, while in many cases providing greater preservation of personal wealth. In so many fibre-rich examples, the benefit accruing to society goes far beyond the direct economic benefits invested or identified by the investor community. As one of the main recipients, society in general will be the main beneficiary of the fibre networks being built. To this end, it is critically important that society's understanding of these benefits is increased and that society starts to demand change. If I look at the mid to long-term challenges facing Europe, over and above the challenges of our aging population and the increased pressure that they place on our healthcare systems, environmental sustainability and lifting economic productivity must be core to all government strategies. Fibre-to-the-home networks can help to deliver or enable a significant part of the solution to each of these challenges. Fibre-to-the-home infrastructure has the capacity to transform public services, like education and government services, but it relies on the enablement of the right infrastructure to deliver the appropriate services. The public sector is the perfect anchor tenant for such networks, but it needs to use its power to help move the market, and it can only do that by committing to the change that is needed. Changes that are needed to raise educational standards, while simultaneously increasing the availability and reducing the cost of a world-class education for all of Europe's citizens. Changes needed to offset the cost increases driven by our aging population, while simultaneously improving the quality of life for our elder citizens. Changes needed to eradicate the barriers to innovation by our digital natives, so that Europe can take a leadership role in the world's digital future. This will involve significant and serious change. It is complex and will require negotiations across all facets of society, whether it's with teaching staff and their unions, nursing and medical staff and their unions. It won't happen overnight. However, we have started, and we have started well. We are only at the beginning of possible developments that can be enabled by fibre capacity. Most future applications we cannot even dream of today. History has been consistent. History has shown us that the bandwidth always precedes the application innovation. Think about doing everything we take for granted today, like Netflix and FaceTime or Facebook Live, and do it on a 1 megabit connection and see how you get on. Or better again, do it on a dial-up connection. The reality is that the experience would be so poor that we would never use those applications, let alone the billions of users that enjoy them today. The bandwidth had to come first. A fun fact to think about: in any given city, the traffic that you will see will typically consist of approximately 30% of cars that are looking for a parking space. It's a fairly simple example, but one that could have a great impact on mobility in cities. Connected cars will be great in themselves, but imagine the possibilities with traffic management when the cloud has the capability to detect congestion building in a city and to slow down traffic from entering that region. Similarly, if the cloud can alert the vehicles in that area to freed up parking spaces that are in close proximity to them. The merger between Internet of Things and much better network capacity opens a range of exciting possibilities, some productive, some noble or worthy, and some just plain old-fashioned fun. We should not seek to anticipate. History has shown it is unexpected developments that have the greatest impact, and we must prepare for them by having the right infrastructure in place. You know, in the mobile space, 3G was starting to look like it was going to be a failure until the iPhone came along. Capability first, then innovation, then development. So why fibre? A lot of people observe that wireless solutions will develop the last hop in data delivery. I fully agree. For the record, the world is going wireless. However, when I look at a wireless solution, they all need to get onto a fixed infrastructure as quickly as they can. And the faster the wireless solution, the quicker it needs to get off the airwaves. At the Fibre to the Home Council Europe, we view our infrastructure, our telecoms network infrastructure, as an ecosystem. And as with any ecosystem, there is collaboration, dependency, interdependence, as well as rivalry and a richness of interaction. However, fibre is the element that underpins the overall telecoms ecosystem. It is therefore critical for the well-being of our sector, of our economy, of our societies, that we move to fibre-to-the-home networks as rapidly as possible. To put it at its simplest, communications based on fibre optic glass is based on pulses of light that transmit ones and zeros of the digital age, as opposed to the electrical pulses over copper or via radio wave in a wireless context. Nobody is able to beat the speed of light, and hence there is universal agreement that all fixed networks will move to fibre. Some question the speed at which this transition will happen, and in turn the urgency of making such a move. But that transition is coming, and it is inevitable. Make no mistake, the importance of these relationships is key. Sweden moved first to 4G deployment in Europe, but in a study by their regulator, PTS, they found that the reason Sweden moved first had very little to do with the availability of spectrum and had a lot to do with the availability of backhaul networks. Backhaul networks that match the capacity of the wireless network, namely the availability of fibre. We are doubling down on this relationship in a 5G world. There is not much point in having gigabit capacity and single-digit millisecond latency if you cannot backhaul it on an equally performant network. So we need a lot of new network. We need a lot of complementary network investments. Where have we made progress, and what do we need to do next? It's important that we recognize that the policymakers in the European Commission have made a huge shift in their thinking. For years, we have complained of what we saw as false technological neutrality, where nothing was said regarding technology choice, even though in every access market in Europe, we suffered market failure in the form of dominance. Now the Commission has moved to a true form of technology neutrality. It sets very ambitious targets and lets the technologies choose themselves. Of course, we have the headline of gigabit connectivity to all socioeconomic drivers and 100 megabits available universally. But it is the specific reference to fibre to the home and fibre to the building or equally performant networks that makes the real difference. In effect, the Commission sets a performance target by reference to fibre and accepts any technology that can meet those targets. These targets are in the Gigabit Society communication, but also in legislative proposals that are proposed as a formal target for national regulators to aim for. Even the very act of setting very high capacity at fibre to the home or fibre to the basement or its equivalent is important and has direct and immediate consequences. For instance, in my home country of Ireland, the government's national broadband plan changed its network specification to require fibre to the home. We see the UK has now allocated funding that's specifically for fibre to the home. Others are following suit, and we can expect to see many more such initiatives in the coming months and years. Public funding is great, and it can help on the margin, but it is the free market and the industry that will have to do the heavy lifting. The legislative proposals from the Commission are very positive in our view, and match the preferred model for fixed access regulation very closely. The Fibre to the Home Council Europe has long advocated a three-step approach. Firstly, to set a fibre target and specify geographically where competition can work to spur investment, and more importantly, where it cannot work. Second is to enable a fibre rollout by lowering the barriers to entry, and this can be through a sensible scheme to share passive infrastructures, and probably most importantly, to ensure that a solution exists that deals with the in-building wiring. Third is to create the right incentives for operators to build where they can. And this often requires that virtual access remedies are removed or at least greatly constrained. We have seen this model work in a large number of markets, each with its own variations and peculiarities, but each following these basic elements, and I'm pleased to see these elements at the heart of the Commission's new access regulation proposals. This builds on the work policymakers have done in the last years, helping the industry to find ways to reduce the cost of deployment through the Cost Reduction Directive and others. We at the Fibre to the Home Council Europe are very positive and very supportive of those efforts, and particularly of the recent proposals, and hope to see their rapid adoption into law. Does this mean that everything is rosy? Of course not. But I am very pleased to say that we are moving in the right direction, and that there is a stronger than ever momentum across Europe towards fibre to the home. Good connectivity is not just something for the rich. It's not just for the lucky. It's not just for the elite. It's something for everyone, and we need to pay attention to the digital divide. Society should not be judged by the standards of those who have everything. It should be judged on how it treats those who are on the margins, either economically or based on their geography. We risk exclusion in the digital world, which may be even more dramatic than in the analog world. There are those who are at risk of being excluded from a democratic process that is increasingly digitized. Those who are at risk of being excluded from learning and healthcare, and all the other improvements that a fibre to the home broadband network can deliver. Some seem to believe that fibre to the home in our cities would be sufficient, but this is patently not the case. Would we deny other essential services to rural areas? Perhaps we'd force a lower electrical voltage onto rural communities. Or better again, maybe we could get the rural communities to generate their own electricity. That'd make everyone's lives easier, wouldn't it? No, we wouldn't do this, nor should this be the case for very high-capacity connectivity. We need fibre to the home, and we need it everywhere. Fibre to the Home Council Europe's Deployment and Operation Committee ran the numbers in 2012 on a full fibre to the home network deployment throughout Europe, and reran the numbers earlier this year. The cost will be well below €150 billion over the next 10 years. And if we allow for displaced other investments, the incremental capex will be very much less than that number. Ubiquitous fibre to the home is feasible, and we must not limit our ambitions. The new broadband platform in the Committee of the Regions will leverage local and regional initiatives, while the new Connecting Europe Broadband Fund will help to close the funding gap. Yes, we are calling for the right networks. Yes, we are calling for the right services as well. And yes, we are calling for the right speeds, but we are also calling for inclusion, because it's important for everyone, every European citizen, to share the means to improve their lives and their circumstances, no matter where they are. Let me conclude with this. Fibre to the home can deliver a vision of the future which we will see exciting new services deployed in a range of domains, driving Europe's economy forward in a sustainable and progressive way. We can only truly rely on these services if they are built upon the most reliable networks, namely fibre. And we must remember, many network elements are dependent on others. So for example, we will not get 5G unless we have fibre available to support that technology and its promise of the future. The Commission has recognized this fact and is legislating to accelerate fibre investments. As the body representing the industry whose vision is to accelerate fibre deployment for the good of society, we look forward to working closer with policymakers to deliver this vision of the future. I'd like to close by once again welcoming each and every one of you to the 2017 Fibre to the Home Conference and welcome you to your future. Thank you.